Hello, thanks again for joining me on this edition of Sport Exchange. My name is Judy Olano. You know how we do it on your sports business show. We take you through some of the exciting times or some of the exciting packages that are happening, in the world of sports. Of course, when you talk about those packages, we're talking about the kind of packages that transform to money, empowerment as well also, and development. This is where we bring all the issues and we'll trash them, we look at it, we analyze, dissect them so that you can have an understanding of what it takes to build sports into a money spinning business. Yeah, thank you very much once again for joining me. Yeah, and hopefully we will throw some light into the topic for today. Okay, let's quickly go on a break. When we come back, we are looking at the NUGA review on the show today. The Nigerian University Games Association, the Unilag, University of Lagos hosted the 26th edition, and we will be talking about that particular edition. Don't go away, and I'll be back.
Fantastically finished.
Welcome back. Straight before we go, the question of the NCAA, whether you know about the National Collegiate Athletics Association, that's the NCAA. Short one about the NCAA. The National Collegiate Athletics Association, NCAA, is the equivalent of our Nigerian University Games Association here in Nigeria. The NCAA typically pulls in about $1 billion each year in revenue from media rights fees, ticket sales, corporate sponsorships, and a proliferation of television ads anchored around a 3-week-long tournament. And the games aren't just a big business within the collegiate ecosystem. Yeah, it's so massive in the US. This year alone, 45 million Americans will wager an estimated $3.1 billion on the tournament, according to the American Gaming Association. Big brands also will take their place of the profits, but the NCAA conference commissioners and executives will see the heaviest cash out. Last year, that is 2021, NCAA earned $1.15 billion in revenue, with the tournament representing almost 90%, which prompted an outrage that necessitated a change in rule for the athletes to earn money from their names, images, and likeness, though they are still prohibited from earning a salary to play while in school. One of the most lucrative contracts connected with the tournament, that's the NCAA tournament, is the one for broadcast rights. In 2010, the NCAA signed a 14-year, $10.8 billion contract with CBS Sports and Turner Broadcasting. Paid over the term, the deal was extended in April 2016 for an additional $8.8 billion that will keep the tournament on the networks until 2032 and 33. Wow, that's massive. So that's why it's not a coincidence when you talk about the March Madness, because that's when the NCAA tournament is on all through April. Coincidentally, also, we had the Nigerian University Games hosted by University of Lagos, which just ended some days ago. So that's what we'll be looking at. And joining me to look at this is one of Nigeria's top sports administrator and sports consultant also. Dr. Kweku Adedayo Tando joins me from Lagos. Doctor, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much today. It's my pleasure to be on the program today.
Doctor, it's not a coincidence that you are here today to help us review NUGA games. And Of course, you've done so much. You've been everywhere, especially when you talk about both professional as well as whether amateur and tertiary sports also. At some point, you were in charge of the Lagos State Sports Commission, and talking about the National Sports Festival, you were a consultant to the last host, that's Edo States. And let's talk NUGA now. My first question to you will be, the NUGA is a 2-year cycle, but we can't guarantee that we will host it in the next 2 years. What do you think is the cause for the inconsistency? Let's start from there.
Yeah, you've made a very good point, Jide. I think the last NUGA games were held about 7 or 8 years ago. And since then, something that's meant to be a 2-year event has not held until Unilag hosted it just very recently. It would have to do with quite a number of factors. And first of all, the manner of bidding to host the event has to be taken into consideration. Funding has to be taken into consideration. And the structure of NUGA itself as a business entity, I'm talking about the administration of NUGA now as a business entity. Those are factors that would have to be taken into consideration to find out why the regularity cannot be guaranteed. And one thing that does is, once you cannot guarantee the regularity of the event, then you're making it more difficult for sponsors, you are making it more difficult for marketers, and you're also even making it more difficult for the schools, the universities, to plan for this event. And all these factors, tend to make it a tough sell when you don't have a regular calendar for your sporting event.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you listened to my prologue, trying to lay the background by using the NCAA. I know you are also conversant with that structure. Am I being too hard? Is it a case of apple and oranges here, or should I just want something like that?
Yeah, not really. When I was listening to your preview, I was actually quite amazed by the figures and all that. But one thing stood out for me. The NUGA Games has the content. What we need now is to package it in such a way that we can make it sellable in this country. If you look at the NCAA, for example, yes, you have the NCAA, but they have various events. They have the NCAA athletics, they have the NCAA basketball. It's not a multi-sporting event like NUGA is now, that you have about 17 sports taking place together. Now, of course, this is the way you have to start a multi-sport. It is when you are able to package effectively and set up structures for the administration, for the various sports, that you can now begin to break out into having separate national championships for each particular sport, which is what the NCAA does now. And what that does also is, you will find that there are certain companies, corporate sponsors, that are affiliated to particular sports. So it is easier, for example, for them to say, okay, we'll sponsor the NCAA golf, or we'll sponsor the NCAA basketball, because that already is their catchment area. We have a long way to go with NUGA to get to that level where we can break out into national championships. But it starts from getting the present structure working properly. And then we can begin to break out to having individual sporting events for NUGA.
The hassle is a strike. And while also looking at what you just said about what sports can do, especially with the content we've just seen with the NUGA, and I asked myself that if, for example, NUGA has the opportunity to earn, like, say, between $900 million and $1 billion, and do you think we'll still be talking about ASU strike? Because that's massive money, and that can also be reinvested into other things.
Oh, yes. You're quite right. In many of the universities in the US, the income they get from sports is used not only for the athletes, but also to develop infrastructure. By the time you begin to develop sporting infrastructure, which would, of course, include hostel accommodation, sporting facilities, and a lot of other things that will relieve the pressure on our university system and effectively help to reduce the strikes that we have right now. We need to put in place the right structure for NUGA. I was asking a lot of questions during the last event, and for me, NUGA, the administration of NUGA right now does not have a structure in place. For example, do we have a functional NUGA secretariat located anywhere? Do we have staff working in the NUGA office, professional staff in various aspects, IT, marketing, and so on and so forth? Do we have a structure that ensures that NUGA has partners? For example, I'll give you an example. In the World Cup, for example, FIFA has about 10 partners that are there all the while. These partners give a certain amount of money every year to FIFA. NUGA needs to have that structure, that kind of structure in place. And if an effective marketing structure is set up, it will not be difficult for NUGA to get companies and corporate sponsors that will be able to give a certain percentage of their revenue to NUGA on a yearly basis in return for visibility and marketing and branding opportunities. The structure really needs to set up, and I'm happy that discussions are already starting in this direction. We were able to talk to quite a number of the NUGA officials, and the thinking is that this has to be in place before we can have a viable NUGA structure.
Of course, that is the reason, I think, because I followed some of the conversation that you were doing through via social media handles, some of the things you were putting out, and that's the reason why we are having this conversation. And one of the things that struck me during the games that you were able to put out in terms of the content was the fact that looking at I think the more the merrier. And this is one thing that this particular these NUGA games produce. That's the merger of the privates and the public universities. I feel that at some point the private universities were trying to do their own, but right now I see that there is a kind of merger where they also participated, and we could see that we could weigh what you could see from the performances that some of those private universities didn't do too badly in terms of performance. And going by the medals table, you could see the likes of Nile University, some of this other university that. What do you think? What are the things, looking at comparative advantage now? What would you say about some of the performances of some of these public as well as private universities?
Very good question, Jide, and it's something that really enthralled me during the NUGA games. And I made inquiries to see or to try and find out what these private universities are doing to make them begin to excel in sports. Don't forget, I think prior to this NUGA games, it probably was only Benson Idahosa University that had taken part in NUGA games as a private university. But this year, I think we have about 6 or 8 of them taking part, not just taking part, but doing well. And I'll give you an example or 1 or 2 examples. Nile University, for example, when I spoke to some of their officials and officers there, they have a deliberate sports recruitment policy in that university. Nile University gives scholarships to students that excel in sports, not just scholarships, but they also ensure that they combine sports and education effectively. There's a program that makes sure that they don't suffer educationally because they are taking part in sports. It's a deliberate policy by Nile University. And it does not start from the university level. It starts from the secondary school level. I understand that they have a secondary school or a college that is affiliated to the university. So the recruitment starts from that college at secondary school level, and then they move into university. I recall about 4 years ago or thereabouts, I was able to get, when I was with the Lagos State Sports Commission, I was able to get about 8 of our secondary school athletes who had done well in the youth games into this secondary school in Abuja. I think it was a Nigerian Turkish secondary school, which is affiliated to Nile University. This program was something that had been packaged by the Honorable Minister of Sports, Mr. Sunday Dari, And I can tell you now that some of those students that went into the secondary school are now, some of them are now in the affiliate Nile University and excelling in sports and also getting their education. So it takes our mind back to what is also being done at NCAA level. You know, of course, you know that it's a deliberate, there's a deliberate sports recruitment policy in the universities in the US. A lot of Nigerian athletes benefited from it in times past. Falila Tugunkoya, Yusuf Ali, Marion Yali, Henry Amike, and all a whole load of others. So if we begin to have Nigerian universities imbibing this deliberate sports recruitment policy, in a few years' time, we'll be able to see that our sports development is now linked very closely with education. And we have athletes that will not only excel in sports, but will also be able to make a living for themselves after their sporting career ends. That, I believe, is the way forward, and it's something that should be recommended even to our public universities. A deliberate sports recruitment policy that will tie in sports and education is necessary for us to have the best of our talents doing sports in Nigeria.
All right. Okay, at this point, let's quickly just take a break, and so that we will return, because Dr. Kweku Adedayo Tando is still with me on the show, because we're going to still have one or two questions to ask him before we let him go. But that will be after this time out. Don't go away.
Fantastically finished.
All right, welcome back. It's still Sport Exchange, and we are reviewing the Nigerian University Games that was recently held at the University of Lagos. The host was University of Lagos. Oh, and doing that is sports consultant and sports administrator of high repute, Dr. Kweku Adedayo Tando, who is joining me in Lagos. And Doctor, let's talk about University of Port Harcourt too. The last time you said about 7 years ago when NUGA was held, they came tops and they've repeated it. What are they doing right? Is it because they have the high performance center there? If that is the case, then we should replicate it all over. Or what do you think?
Yes, of course, the advantage of the high performance center is there, but it's a bit more than that. University of Port Harcourt is one university that also understands the synergy between sports and education. And we must give kudos to Professor Ken Anugweje of the Sports Institute in Port Harcourt, who has over the years championed the merger of sports and education. And you can see the results in Uniport. But when people talk about the high performance center being the only reason for Uniport excelling in sports, I want to differ a bit, because this high performance center in Uniport is actually open to students and athletes from all over the country. There's quite a number of athletes that I know of who are not in Uniport that are benefiting from the high performance center. It's just that the University of Port Harcourt authorities, under the leadership of Professor Ken, have taken advantage of that and ensured that even in the university system, there is a sports institute that works closely with that high performance center. And that's the reason for what you're doing. Quite a number of athletes from Edo State, Delta State, even Lagos State have benefited from the high performance center. But Uniport has put it in the university structure by setting up a sports institute. And I think this is the way to go. And I know that the CAA, that's the African Athletics Confederation, is in the process of setting up satellite campuses of that high performance center in some other states in the country. And the major criteria for that is that wherever they set it up, it has to be tied to a university in that city. So of course, if that comes to play very soon, you will expect that in the next few years, those universities that also have the satellite campuses of the high performance centers located within them should begin to make best use of it and begin to excel in sports in universities.
Before I let you go, one more question. That's it. There's something about the after effects. I think I can perceive that now that the excitement is still in there, with what University of Lagos has been able to do, I think we should have the NUGA Games in the next 2 years. Do you think that's possible? And I can maybe from the body language of the sponsors now. Well, what do you think? Because now I think we should take it more serious, and that should be your parting shot. What do you think we should do?
Yeah, that's a good one. First of all, I want to commend the University of Lagos for putting up such an excellent show, both in the sporting content, the technical content, and the entertainment content as well. We must appreciate the efforts of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Lagos, Professor Oluwatoyin Ogundipe, who was the chairman of the LOC, and all the other members of the LOC, putting up a games that has, as you have said, set a foundation for going forward in the organization of the NUGA Games. Quite a number of companies came in as sponsors, and for me now is the time for NUGA to get in touch with those sponsors and see the possibility of getting some of them as partners, not just people who come up to sponsor a particular NUGA Games or not, to come up as partners to NUGA. Like you said, the tempo is high now, the excitement is high, and this is the time to strike the iron when it is hot, as they say. NUGA needs to now use this as a foundation to ensuring that it gets the right partners involved, so that we have a constant and a consistent timetable for NUGA Games, so that we can begin to build on the successes that Unilag have laid up, and then we don't allow everything to fizzle out. If we do not catch it right now and don't host the next NUGA Games in 2 years, don't maximize what we have been able to put together in terms of corporate sponsors and corporate support, we may find that it will fizzle out again, and then we'll be back to the starting block. But I want to say that this is a good starting point, and I want to call on the NUGA authorities to not let this time die off. Let us build on it, let us work on it, and let us begin to establish structures that will be in place for NUGA, even beyond any particular individual.
Well, that's it, beyond any particular individual. That's what it points to drop the anchor on. And I must say, thank you very much for joining me on the show, Dr. Kweku Adedayo Tando, sports administrator and consultant to many sports organizations globally. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, Jide. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to being with you again.
Oh, well, very soon you will be back. Thank you very much. See you, and have a wonderful day. Okay, that's it. Sports consultant, sport administrator, Dr. Kweku Tando, reviewing the Nigerian University Games hosted by the University of Lagos with me on the show. So it's time for me to go now. Thank you very much for joining me. But before I go, something to ponder on. It has to do with yes, football this time around. It's the fact that there is what we call the Nigerian Football Federation. Yeah, should think about this, ponder on this particular thing, because in the build-up to the World Cup, the playoff between the Black Stars of Ghana and the Super Eagles of Nigeria had to be played on 2 legs. That is, one in Ghana and one in Nigeria. And this is the talking point of some of the things happening. This we can deduce from the first leg that happened in Kumasi. And this information is coming courtesy of a Ghanaian journalist, Gary Al Smith, and it says that the proceeds for the Ghana-Nigeria game in Kumasi, that's the first leg, was about 1.4 million cedis. That is about $190 US, $190,000 US. That's for the gate fee. The last time, according to the National Sports Authority of Ghana, that's it. The They say that this is the highest amount that they've made since they started playing in Kumasi. That the last time they did that was during the 2019 African campaign. That's the Cup of Nations. Usually when they take it to Kumasi, the Baba Yara Stadium, you could see that the stadium was filled to the brim. But what do we have in Nigeria? We have to throw the gates open. And at the end of the day, no money is made. Football is business. I understand you can subsidize, but making it free does not add up. We can do better. That's my parting shot on today's show. We can do better. That's it. Thank you once again for joining me on the show today. Let's do this some other time. Till then, don't forget our YouTube channel, TV360 Nigeria, and our social media handles, Sport Exchange 24. Just follow us, like our page, and subscribe. That's what I will advise. Till I come your way next time, I'm yours truly today, tomorrow, and of the future, sports, business, Jide Olaniro, signing up.